Hello and welcome to episode 167 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're talking about quite a bit, but the biggest news, of course, is the Vegas Falcons are winless no more. After years, it feels like they have finally won a CDL match, and we will break all of that down. We also have a roster change happening in the CDL among the top 5 CDL teams, which is pretty crazy to think about. And we got some other stuff to talk about. But before we get to any of that, how you doing, Bink?
All right, like you said, it was definitely a eventful weekend of Call of Duty matches, and even today we got some news that seems like we've been talking about it for a while, but it's finally actually happening in terms of a Carolina roster change. So lots to talk about.
So, like I said at the beginning, there is a lot to talk about with the CDL, and a lot is happening. But over the weekend, the kind of all of the eyes of the Call of Duty esports world was on one match in particular. It was not LAT versus Toronto. It was Vegas versus OpTic Texas. Of course, Vegas coming into this match had lost every single CDL match in their team's existence, and OpTic had, last week they were pretty good actually. They looked like they might be able to compete for the number 1 seed if they were able to keep things rolling along. But that was not meant to be. What was meant to be was Pred getting whatever revenge he wanted to get on OpTic. Vegas Falcons win this match 3-1. They lose the S&D in a round 11, which I believe I texted you and I said I thought that was it when they lost the round 11 because they were up 5-4 and then they lost the last 2 rounds. I was like, all right, that's done. OpTic's going to come back. They're going to win the control, probably win the hard point. None of that happened. Vegas clutches up in round 5 of the control, and then they nearly 100-point club OpTic on Skyline hardpoint. 250 to 112 to not only extend their hardpoint win streak now, which is crazy to even think about because they lost nearly 30 consecutive hardpoints to start the season. But this is their 4th consecutive hardpoint win, and then more importantly, it secures their first match victory in the CDL. They get their first CDL points of the season, so everything really is kind of a milestone for Vegas in this. I assume you had a pretty similar reaction. Like, this is crazy. This is one of it felt like a feel-good moment, because I think we've ragged on Vegas, rightfully so, for most of the season because they haven't been very competitive. But with this new roster and with Xnid especially being the lone holdover, it felt like, he got his moment. What did you feel with this win in particular?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Exton. Definitely felt really happy for him that they finally got a win. You could just tell, like in the post match interview, and just everything that this really meant a lot to him, and rightfully so. Guys put in a lot of work. Hasn't always seen the results early this year with the previous team, but new roster coming in, and they're able to uh, change their fortunes a little bit again. Obviously, bit of a lost season at this point, unless they literally just become the best team in the game and win the next 2 majors and make champs. But they had to start somewhere and finally get a series win, and just the fact they were able to do it against OpTic is, um, definitely unexpected. I feel like, if this happened with these current rosters last stage when OpTic were going through their struggles, then I wouldn't have been totally as surprised. But yeah, I mean the revenge match narratives, however you want to look at it, was a little too strong here. We talked about it last episode. Pred calling a practice session on their off day or whatever. Apparently last week we talked about it. And putting in that extra work. We said maybe he was just motivated to beat his former team, and it paid off, and they were able to get this win. So definitely a big win. Um, for those guys. So, and for a lot of people, even Arcides and Priesta, just guys who have been doubted in recent times, and they're able to get a not only get a win, but get a win against the most popular team in the CDL, no matter the shape or form that they're currently playing in as a squad. Like that means something, and this is going to be something now. Like, as long as the CDL is going on and we have like trivia questions and stuff, who's the first team to lose to the Vegas Falcons? That's OpTic Texas, and that's something that's notable. And a lot of other people, if it was the all Saudi roster, there were a lot of people who would not have wanted to be on the end of that notation in the history books, just because of the struggles of that roster and everything we've talked about for months now with how poor that team played. But this new look Vegas squad, like you said, they've been playing well, especially just a complete turnaround in the hard points. And if they're able to, keep on being a strong hardpoint team, this is something I've mentioned with Minnesota recently after their change, but it's just something I always keep in mind with roster changes in general, is just the current practice schedule for a lot of these teams is focusing on those respawns, and then you get to work on the S&D and stuff. So if they are able to continue to look strong in the hard points, maybe they can put in a little more work in the search and improve in that regard faster than some other teams, and maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see them in a top 4 or competing on Championship Sunday at Major 3. That'd certainly be a very interesting storyline. I'm not gonna jump the gun to that point quite yet, but this is obviously a step in the right direction.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it might be a step too far for Major 3, but Major 4, their qualifier set is probably the easiest that they've had all season, at least on paper. So maybe there is a chance for a winner's bracket at least start at Major 4, and then who knows from there. That would obviously be a really big moment, just like we talked about with the Boston Breach at the beginning of the season, when a team that has been so bad for so long, really you take the little victories. Like just starting in the winner's bracket is a huge deal, and it would be for Vegas, whether it is Major 3 or Major 4. This is a huge moment for them, and it should be celebrated. And I did think it was properly celebrated by many people in the community. I felt like there was a lot of, a lot of respect being paid toward Exnid, and the fact that he stuck through it, and he probably dealt with a lot of slander, or a lot of really just bad thoughts about like the team, and whether they were really ever going to win, just like the same conversations that we had. And then you had a good statement on Priesta and Arcides. Like Priesta, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I thought he's probably done in the CDL. I didn't think that he would be back. Arcides, I don't know if I went that far in that direction, but like to the same degree, just because you were a former world champion doesn't mean that you'll ever get back into the CDL. And now that he's back, he has played well, and for this to happen in his the second or third match that he's been a part of, I think that's a really special moment. And obviously, Pred, he's just great. So him being the leader, whether it's the actual leader or just like the best player on this team, but he's been super valuable to the team. And obviously, he's way too far away from MVP talks. But if they were to have this kind of run that you're talking about, like if they're just able to kind of pick up a lot of momentum, I think he's not going to win it, but I just think like a little respect would be paid, I guess, like an honorable mention almost of like, he did something that was pretty unprecedented in going to the worst team and kind of digging them out of the dirt. Congratulations to the Vegas Falcons. Congrats to Clayster, his first win as a head coach in the CDL. And I think his first tweet was like, "Told you so," or something like that, which was very on brand for Clay. Vegas wins. I think before we talk about Vivid, I do want to just touch on OpTic because we're on this topic. So yeah. OpTic, obviously, on the losing end of this one, they started off the week on the losing end of another match. They lost to the Miami Heretics in the first match. They lost Both hard points. They lost to S&D and they won the control. So, that was a little bit different from their series against Vegas. Obviously, we talked about the Florida OpTic curse, so to speak, and it's kind of translated over to the Miami Heretics. Is OpTic struggling this week after having a 2-0 week previously? Is that a cause for concern for you? Was last week kind of a flash in the pan, or is this week more fluky, I guess? Which week, I guess, would you say is more indicative, in your opinion, of current form OpTic Texas?
I don't know if that's how I would phrase it either way, just because, even if you go back to last week, like they're around 11 away from possibly losing to Kenny in the other revenge match there. And I think if you say like this week was a fluke because of the Vegas win, and just if you just say this week is a fluke in part because of that Vegas match, that kind of discredits Miami's form to this point. And I think obviously I feel like we'll probably talk about Miami in a little bit here, but they're looking really scary since bringing Super into the roster. So I think again that especially last week the thought process really was for OpTic, like, we finally got some wins under our belt in the qualifiers after really struggling, and the green wall started to get excited and be like, yeah, we're back, things are looking good. Then you see these upcoming matches. We both picked OpTic to beat both Miami and Vegas, set them up to be 4-0 in these qualifiers, easily in winners bracket for Major 3, and now this is like a dose of reality, I guess, in the sense of like it's I don't think it's like a major red flag, but it's kind of like the roller coaster ride we've talked about at different points for different teams over the years, where they experienced some really good highs last week with a 2-0 week, and now it's right back down with the lowest of lows at an 0-2 week, and now they're 2-2 in a 5-set qualifier, and their next match is against FaZe. And if they lose that, they might not even be in the winners bracket to start Major 3 again, which would be consecutive majors starting the losers bracket for OpTic. So it's just overall it's a tough position to be in. They definitely I don't want to say, I think it's fair to say, they were most likely counting on that Vegas win, just because that has been for in the most respectful way possible. Before this current roster change, every Vegas match, teams were looking at it as a win in the book, and they could bank on that being a win. There was the meme in the first season of the CDL with Seattle and LAG, that Seattle was farming LAG bucks or whatever, because like that was the only team the Seattle squad was beating, and they were getting points based off that. But obviously in the end it didn't matter too much. But so like people were farming their Falcon bucks earlier this year against the Saudi project, and now they make a new team, and that new team still hadn't won, even though they looked, obviously improved. And now to be that squad to give Vegas Falcons their first win, I think the bigger picture way to look at this for OpTic is, how do they let this loss and this 0-2 week affect the team's morale and their mentality heading into essentially a must-win match this week?
Yeah, and I think with me, it's kind of the whiplash that we saw starting at Major 2. They come in with such low expectations because that was the first event without Kenny, and I think, at least I thought, Minnesota would be better than they were going into that event. They proved not to be. They made that roster change afterward, but they beat Minnesota. They win 3-0. Next day they get 3-0'd by Toronto. So like there's that whiplash. Last week we see OpTic, they come in, like you said, they win that round 11. They beat Kenny and the Rocker, and then they beat C9. They had this 2-0 week, which hadn't happened in months, and this week the whiplash happens. They lose to Vegas and Miami. Vegas obviously being the worst team in the league, Miami being like one of those bottom 4 or 5 teams as well. And now OpTic is in that situation, like you said, where they are now looking at this last match in the Major 3 qualifiers as a must win. And unfortunately for them, their must-win match is against Atlanta FaZe, which is not the team that I would necessarily want to play in a must-win. Granted, FaZe has not looked infallible in these qualifiers, but still, FaZe is FaZe, and OpTic, at least current OpTic, is not, is not the OpTic I think we all expected. And I'm just not entirely sure where they go. I don't know if they're even considering a roster change at some point. Obviously it's not going to happen. Well, I can't say it won't happen before Major 3 because they decided to make a roster change before Major 2, but I would imagine that there's not going to be a change before Major 3. But if they were to, say, lose to FaZe and then obviously go to the Major and then maybe lose in the first round, would a roster change happen at that point going into the final set of qualifiers? And really what we have to be looking at is OpTic is in real danger of not making champs because they're not consistently beating teams anymore. Like even Vegas is not a gimme anymore, and I would assume that they don't play Vegas again unless it's at a major. So like they really have to pick it up. They cannot just rely on kind of farming these bottom 4 or 5 teams because they can't beat them consistently. And I think a roster change might be in order, but it goes back to what we talked about, months ago now, but like, I don't think that there's a player out there that seems likely or like a good fit for OpTic, at least at this current point in time. And that just is a really bad place for OpTic Texas to be going into a very important match this weekend against Atlanta FaZe. Next up, we want to talk about Carolina. So Carolina, I should start with a positive and then probably end on more of a negative note. Carolina is in a place that nobody expected them to begin the season. They are usually a contending team in these majors, usually top 4, top 5. They are certainly one of the better teams, certainly a top half team. There's no doubt about that. But they have not been able to kind of reach the mountaintop that some of these other teams have. Even Vancouver has been able to kind of eclipse them over the last month and a half. So it seemed like, and we talked about it before the Major 3 qualifiers, Carolina was looking to make a roster change. They seemed set on benching or releasing Vivid and replacing him with Kenny, who had just been released by OpTic Texas. That did not happen, reportedly because of money issues. There was a difference in money between Kenny and Carolina. Kenny ends up going to Minnesota. Carolina doesn't make any change. And I thought that was weird at the time. And now it is kind of, I don't know if this was what they were planning, or I don't know if they really had a backup plan after Kenny. But it appears that obviously Carolina will be moving on from Vivid, and they have released him as of today, and they have not announced his replacement, but reportedly Rex will be taking his spot in Carolina. So Rex has been in Challengers for pretty much forever, I think. Like he's for like literally years, and he's been one of the top Challengers players for a long time. I think he was on the Omit Brooklyn team that I could be wrong, but he's been on one of the top Challengers teams for years, and now he appears, at least according to Breaking Point, to be heading to Carolina. What do you think about this move? And more, I guess, importantly, what do you think about the timing of this move to make this benching or releasing after 2 weeks of the Major 3 qualifiers?
Yeah, I guess that's something I really wasn't thinking about until just now, is just the timing of this. And because I believe Carolina's played, I was just looking at the standings tweet and I closed out of it. Yeah, Carolina's played 4 matches, so that means literally whoever does replace Vivid, whether it is Rex or not, they get 1 online qualifier match, and then you're into the major. Carolina's 2-2 in the qualifier, so similar position to OpTic right now, where they only have 1 match this week. If they lose it, they're in danger of starting in losers bracket. If they win it, they should be, 3 wins is usually enough, especially with only 5 matches. 3-2 should get you into winners bracket. So it's not going to be a large sample size for Rex. this just has to be, I think they're thinking long term here, and instead of necessarily Major 3, just because of Carolina's position in the overall standing so far. I mean, they're in fifth with 210 points, but they're kind of like Vancouver just passed them at 215, and Carolina's in fifth. OpTic's technically in sixth, but there's three teams there: OpTic, Boston, and Miami tied at 130. So there's an 80-point difference between fifth and sixth. So Carolina's in fifth place, but it's a comfortable fifth place for now. So this has to be a move that they're thinking like, obviously they want to do as well as they can at Major 3, but they're thinking ahead here that if they're making the move like this with only one qualifier match left, they have to be thinking like, is this going to put us in a better position to end the season and have a better roster for champs? So I feel like this is just even before the Kenny stuff that apparently that was in talks and then fell through. Just the talking point, one of the talking points around Carolina all year has just been if this team was going to make a move, it felt like Vivid was the guy who was going to be replaced, and obviously that is the case now. So in terms of Rex, if that move, Dylan Rex, if that move is does come to fruition, I'm excited for him because, like you said, he's a guy who's been in challengers for a long time. I've heard his name for a while, and feels like his name has heated up a little bit in recent weeks. Kind of like you mentioned, he was on that Omit Brooklyn team. He's been playing well recently, but he's been a name that's been a part of challengers for years now, and he just hasn't gotten that opportunity in the CDL. So this is, again, a talking point we cover extensively on this podcast is now a guy who hasn't been in the CDL before is getting that opportunity of a lifetime, basically. And what is he going to do with it? Is he going to, seize the opportunity and run away with it, kind of like Neptune has now? Because, like, don't want to jump the gun here, but like if we're thinking ahead the next season, it would be almost ludicrous to think Neptune isn't on a CDL roster because of the way he's played this year. But if you look at someone like Lunars, maybe, like, obviously it's not necessarily his fault, and hasn't been put in the best position to succeed with the General Mate squad, especially compared to Neptune and Vancouver. But like Lunars is probably one of those guys who isn't necessarily guaranteed to have a CDL spot next year just because of the way his debut has gone. So we've seen both ends of that spectrum for people making their CDL debuts, and it's going to be interesting to see where Dylan Rex falls in there if he is actually signed by Carolina. I'm excited for Carolina to make a move, though, especially to see how Rex will work with Slasher, because even like we talked about with Kenny, and even last week when we were talking about that secret C9 tryout with Capsidal apparently trying out in place of Attach, and then we kind of got off track a little bit and started talking about maybe Attach could go to Carolina or something like that. Those guys, like if Attach played with Slasher, Kenny played with Slasher, you kind of know what you're getting out of them. But Rex, especially for people who aren't following challengers super closely, he's more of an unknown quantity. And the expression that artists and people make, like he's like unmolded clay or whatever, and Slasher has the ability to kind of mold him into whatever type of player he wants. Like that's got to be exciting for Slasher, I feel like. At least I would think. I don't know. So yeah, we'll have to see how it works out for Carolina. But I do feel like this was like a ticking time bomb for a couple weeks now. It really felt inevitable that Carolina was going to make a move, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they did it after Major 2, but here we are.
Yeah, Rex has literally been like teammates with pros for like almost all of his teams are almost all pros or former pros in challengers. Like he was on FC Black for challengers champs last year, and his teammates were Brack, Exceed, and Asum. And most recently, he was on Omit Brooklyn with Craze, Exceed, and Mercules. Before that, he was with Fellow, on that team as well. So, like, it's not it's not new for him to be around CDL level talent. It's just new for him to be in the CDL. So, like you said, kind of excited to see what he's able to do. I just, these guys that have been in challengers for a while, you just kind of want them to get their opportunity, at least once, just to see what they can make of it. And hopefully he can make the most of his opportunity. But I was looking up Carolina's record because you were talking about how it's not about standings for them. Like, they're pretty solidly in fifth place. They're among that top 5 contingent, but they're really struggling against the top teams. And we focused primarily on their struggles against LAT and how badly the Thieves have crushed them every single time they played. But their problems are much more concerning with the entire top 4 as a whole. So since the beginning of the Major 2 qualifiers, so this is 2 months as of today, because the first qualifying match for Carolina in Major 2 was February 14th. So over the last 2 months, Carolina is 9-7. They have won all 9 matches against teams that are currently between 6th and 12th in the CDL, and they are 0-7 against teams currently 1 through 4 in the CDL. They have not beaten a current top 4 team in that span, and they've beaten every other team that they have played. I think that is a perfect illustration of the gap that they're trying to close. They are trying to beat the top 4 teams, even if they mess up against some of those bottom 7 teams or whatever, bottom 6 teams every now and then. I think it's worth the risk for them to see if they could eventually beat LAT, beat Vancouver, who obviously they just lost to, which I think that might have been, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because they lose a reverse sweep to Vancouver. Obviously, Vancouver jumps them in the standings as a result, and then, of course, this happens with Vivid and him being released. So, Carolina, this is I really do think it, in my opinion, and I think in theirs as well, this is a risk worth taking, because if they miss champs because they make this roster change, like, it's gonna suck, but it was the risk that you have to take to try to raise your ceiling, so to speak. And I think that is the biggest change here, is they're trying to raise their ceiling heading into the back, or the final 5-6 weeks of the CDL season.
I just want to, I know you'll at least appreciate this, and maybe there's other listeners who will as well. It's not necessarily exactly related to the whole narrative with Carolina, just because this team isn't making a roster change or just can't, because it's, I'm talking about basketball, but the New York Knicks, the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference right now, are like 0 and something against the Celtics, Cavs, and Thunder, and I think it's like expanded to 0 and 16 when you throw in some other teams that aren't necessarily at the very top. I think I saw 0 and 16 versus the Celtics, Cavs, Thunder, Lakers, Clippers, and Warriors. So obviously those last couple teams in the West aren't like the top of the top, but kind of like you said, like, Knicks and Carolina may be a comparable thing, and obviously different. Knicks are entering the playoffs as the 3rd seed, and it's not like they're going to make a roster change, or we have seen some NBA teams ditch their coach right before the playoffs, which is a whole other thing entirely. But I guess just bringing that up because that's what I thought of when you were mentioning that. And, to illustrate, this is something that even happens in real sports. Like, you get a team that has had strong runs at, certain points in the season and look really strong, but then they despite having a good record, they play against the teams above them in the standings and they just get stomped. So I guess overall we'll just have to see if Rex can be that guy who comes in and has an immediate impact with his team. We already know Carolina is going to be really good at search, even if, you throw a recruit bot on Carolina with Slasher, TJ, and Gwen. And I'm going to take that back just because I don't want to discredit Vivid's search, because I think that's what Vivid is best at, really. If, I had to pick one mode for Vivid to, do his best in, I feel like it's search, historically in this year. But end of the day, like, he's coming. Rex is, if the move goes through, he's coming into a team that's in a good spot, should be at champs, and if he wants to push them to the next level, it's really up to him at this point.
Yeah, and I get, I don't know enough about Rex like personally or like his play style, but Carolina has been a very good S&D team all year. That's kind of been their bread and butter, and they've been about 500 in hard point and control. So, something we've talked about with other teams is, are you able to raise the ceiling in those game modes in particular? Can you just improve a little bit, make some kind of headway with hard point and control, and creep up to 55% win percentage, which could go a long way, especially when you're playing teams like Atlanta and LAT, who are notoriously very good in hard point, and those respawn games are very, very important, especially when you get into best of 7 series. So we'll see what happens with Carolina. One player that has seemingly had that kind of big impact that you were just talking about potentially with Rex is Super. Miami Heretics, this was not something that I think any of us expected, but they are now on a 3-match win streak, and it is a bizarre list of teams that they've beaten. They had a Game 5 with the Vegas Falcons, which I believe was Vegas's first Game 5 ever in the CDL. And then to begin this week, they beat OpTic Texas, like we talked about a little bit ago, and then they beat Atlanta FaZe. That last one is a shocker. Of course, Atlanta is not invincible. They have lost before in these qualifiers, but Super has been super. Like, he has been incredible. Right now, he has a 1.112 CDL KD, which is the best of his team. He has looked really, really good, and if he is able to kind of keep this up, who knows what Miami could do at these tournaments. Obviously, they've already got a top 4 finish at Major 1. They seem like they could at least make a gap between themselves and the bottom 5 or 6 teams. But what do you think about Super and the Miami Heretics going 2-0 this week?
Yeah, I think, should be lots of vamos in the chat. Like, this has got to be the most exciting time for this Miami team and their fans, just because of the way this has happened, and kind of like you said, the teams they beat in order to get this position. Like, obviously, you can think of OpTic what you want, but they were 2-0 heading into their match with Miami this week. Miami takes care of business there, and then they beat Atlanta, the team that's won both LAN events this year. And yeah, I think I brought it up when the super change was announced that there was the potential really for it to be a parallel situation to Miami season last year when they bring in Real, and they kind of stumbled at first, but then towards the end of the season they definitely looked like a different team and a stronger team, and now this is much quicker than even last year when Real joined Miami in terms of Super's immediate impact with this squad. But I would have to obviously go back and look at some score lines for Miami with Lucky on the team. But what I feel like I've noticed, at least in the hard points, is that Super has a lot of games where he has lower interactions than Rencor. But it feels like Rencor's kills are up, and maybe it's just he's playing better individually, or maybe he feels more comfortable playing with Super. I don't really know. Maybe Super's just playing slower, and that allows Rencor to play faster. Maybe he thrives. I don't know. But that's kind of like just looking at the numbers. That's what I've noticed. I feel like that the AR duo for them, especially in this past week, they really have been the players that have stood out to me so far with Super in the squad, and especially in the respawns. And you can look at that in multiple facets, just because I always talk about Super Saiyan Real having to show up to kind of like save the day for Miami on past iterations. And now, he doesn't have to do that. He can be just like a regular SNG player. And if the ARs are going off, he can, take the routes and do his job and not have to get a 3-piece on rotation to give his team the chance to win. So I've really been impressed with Super, especially in Search and Destroy. He it was against OpTic. He dropped 16 kills to tie Ghosty for the most in an S&D, and then somebody else did it. It was Nero. Nero did it on Sunday. So we have a 3-way tie between Ghosty, Super, and Nero dropping 16 kills in an S&D this year. and obviously as a big search guy that stands out to me. But I picked up on it right away when Super filled in for that one match for medals earlier this year. Super really stood out to me in that one search map. I'm pretty sure Miami lost the series like 3-1, but they might have won the search. They might have even lost the search. I don't remember, but I just remember I was impressed by what Super did in that search, and he played well in that, and he's carried that over and played well in the searches here. And in the respawns, I think Super and Rancor, it feels like they've been working well together so far. For me, it seems like Rancor is getting in more engagements as an AR, and Super kind of has fewer engagements, so maybe it's just the pacing is working out between them. I don't know. I'm going to keep an eye on that continually moving forward now for the squad. But I got to shout out medals, because really after the map 1 in the series against Miami, between Miami and Atlanta, where obviously I got to give Cell some props. He went 39-21 with a plus 18 KD in map 1 for Atlanta in that series to kick things off there. But then from that point on, medals really stood out in this series, and in particular he went 12-7 in the map 2 search, which was a game 2 round 11, and then he had 22 kills, which isn't a ton for a control, but he was 22-16 and had the most kills in the lobby in the control against Atlanta. And then he has the most kills again in map 4, going 42-30. So medals, no matter when we've been talking about this Miami team, it's always been Real. We're talking about Real. Then Rancor joins the team. We're talking about Rancor and Real. Then Super joins this team. Now we're talking about those 3 guys. And Medals was just like that guy, off to the side we didn't really talk about as much. And I got to give him his flowers here, because he played really well at the end of this Atlanta series. So if these 4 guys can all put it together, and like I said, they did it last year, bringing in Real, and it took longer than this to build up to a team that could really see solid improvement. And I don't know how to phrase it for them this year, because they have that third place finish at Major 1 already. But I just think this Miami team, it's what we always talk about. Kind of talked about it with Thieves as an example last year. Like, you want to be playing your best COD at the end of the season when the tournaments mean the most and there's the most money on the line. And if Miami can keep this up, they're on the right track to do that at the right time. So I'm happy for those guys, and I'm excited to see what they're going to keep bringing to the table.
That conversation that we had a few weeks ago about, well, should OpTic pick up Real, or should one of these top teams target him? If Miami's able to put these Spanish players around him, and I think they are in a unique position where they can look at the entirety of the Spanish COD scene, and they probably could open it up, but right now it seems like they're locked in on Spain. But they can say, who are the 4 best players from Spain, and we're just going to get these guys. We're not going to mess around. Obviously, they've had like a 5-man roster for most of the season, so that's like another advantage, that they're able to kind of make these moves and bring in Super pretty seamlessly. And I think he was in Miami with them, like, so he's kind of it's not like you're just bringing in a new guy who's like completely oblivious to what you've been doing this entire season. He should have had some kind of idea about what they were working towards. And now they're able to kind of see the success. Obviously, this is a short time frame we're looking at. They've won the last 3 matches. They just got first rounded at Major 2. They got first rounded to the minor. They performed very poorly in the Major 2 qualifiers. So we're just talking about the last week, basically. But the last week has been very, very good. And it's been very promising to see how well they've played. But like you said, Meadows deserves his flowers. Real, obviously, we've talked about him at length. Super has been playing very well. And Rancor, as for a midseason pickup, he's been very, very good. And this team, they're in a weird position too, because they're one of those bottom 6 teams or bottom 7 teams, and they're right there with a bunch of other teams. But it feels like they have the potential to go much higher than a lot of those teams. Like we've seen them finish very high at a major. that the same cannot be said for a lot of those other bottom 7 teams. A lot of those teams have been kind of struggling for the entire season. There really hasn't been a ton of bright spots. With Miami, it's been a little bit different. They had the very bright spot, and then they've just had some kind of disappointing online performances until recently. So we'll see what happens. But, again, this is a really encouraging sign for Miami and the future of the Heretics, that they've been able to pull this off. And to beat FaZe in general is just an accomplishment for most of these teams.
I will say, too, this isn't like a one-time thing either for Miami, because they did the 5-man roster last year as well. It's just they had Eric Boom as the 5th guy, and they brought him in temporarily, and then Real replaced him just because they didn't see those immediate results with Eric Boom. But I mean, Miami, for especially because like the guys like Journey and Lucky and Metals were somewhat at least known names in competitive Call of Duty outside of Spain. Aside from them, Miami Heretics in a very short time period have done a really good job in my eyes of identifying that top Spanish talent and, implementing it on their team, kind of like you said. The other thing I just got thinking about when you were talking is I think this is going to be a weird year for the Rookie of the Year award overall, just because, I mean, who knows, maybe Miami just goes off and wins Major 3 now, and this conversation is, not even valid at that point. But at least since the Rookie of the Year has been an official thing in the CDL, it's always, at least it feels like it's always gone to a rookie who has played the entire season in the CDL, and usually it's a rookie who wins an event. It didn't happen last year for Gwyn, but he was. I would have to look at the standings, so I don't think that's necessarily true, because Seattle Surge last year were probably better than Carolina towards the end of the season. But regardless, I think really at this point the only 2 guys who would be in the running, if we were just looking at it from a full season perspective, would be Exnid and Rencor. And now, if let's just say Miami really goes off from here, does Super get more votes or just acknowledgement for Rookie of the Year if he becomes that X factor for this team and kind of takes off, but he didn't play the whole year? Or does Rencor get the nod over him just because he's been on the team for the full year? I don't know the answer there. I could also even see at the end of the day, if none of these teams with rookies win, and then I could see some people voting for Exnid just because of the feel-good story. Now he's got to win. If Vegas continues on an upward trajectory now too, like maybe Exnid could pick some votes up there too. But I was just thinking about that. This could be, especially if Super keeps playing the way he's been playing, this could be the first year that we have somebody win Rookie of the Year where they weren't on a CDL team at the start of the season.
Yeah, I don't know how much people that are like voting for that actually weigh that into it. Like, I know we do, because it just makes more sense if you're only around for 60% of the season, let's say, like you better be maximizing your 60 versus someone else's 100. So we'll see if that plays a factor with the voters and whether they consider that or not. I could see Rencor just winning it because Miami does well, and then he has more playing time than Super, so that it kind of just defaults to him. But like you said, Exnid probably does have a shot as well, because of who knows how Vegas ends their season, I guess, because if they only win 1 match, I have a hard time believing that anyone will pick Exnid. But if they win 5-6 matches by the end of the season, I think there's a realistic shot that he's in the running for Rookie of the Year. I mean, there's only like 3 rookies like right now, so in the entire season. So,
maybe Rex comes in, drops 1.5, Carolina wins the next 2 events.
I mean, if he does that, then yeah, he's going to win Rookie of the Year. So that would be maximizing his like 28% that he has left in the season. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Obviously, I don't even remember who we picked for Rookie of the Year.
Oh, I do. I remember we had the conversation. Are you gonna pick somebody in the CDL right now, or are you going to pick somebody who joins later? And I said I couldn't, because at the start of the season, it was the Falcons guys and Rancor. And I'm pretty sure you picked Rancor. And I know for a fact I said it's going to be somebody who isn't on a team right now. And I said if I had to pick somebody, I picked King Abadi, because that was at the time where people were hyping him up, because there's the talk about him playing like $10,000 wagers from Saudi Arabia like many CODs ago and stuff. Like he was just throwing up massive amounts of cash to try and get really good practice. So I fell for that, and obviously it didn't work out well in that sense. But I guess I got a shot in my prediction if somebody does win, maybe Super Rex.
Yeah, I mean, you got it about as wrong as you possibly could, because he's the worst KD in the entire CDL, and he
Yeah.
hasn't played in like 3 months. But yeah, like, I mean, there were literally only like 5 rookies to start the season, and there are even fewer now,
Yep.
even with Rex coming in.
Lunars.
Yeah, I saw Lunars, and I was like, well, like he's not going to win. Unfortunately, like if the team has success, then you could talk yourself into it. But LAG is still very bad, and he hasn't played like lights out or anything. It's not like a Gwyn situation like last year. So they're in a he's not in a good position to win. So yeah, Rincor is probably the front runner, and we'll see what happens with Super and Rex and Exnid the rest of the way. Maybe Kix comes back in and just tears it up. I don't know if now Vegas is on a winning streak technically. I don't know if you count one as a streak, but I mean now they don't have room for Kix. It's crazy. Next up, PaulEhx. He obviously was recently released by the Minnesota Rocker, and he officially retired from competitive Call of Duty. He said he's going to compete in Warzone, which I saw people talking about as it relates to the age-old debate: who is better, a CDL player or a Warzone player? I think we both know the answer to this, but I think it's interesting nonetheless. I wasn't really expecting the retirement, of course, and I wasn't expecting him to immediately pivot to Warzone. What do you think about this? And obviously, we've seen a lot of former CDL players have success in Warzone, or success streaming Warzone as well. But I guess, what do you think about PaulEhx announcing his retirement from competitive?
Yeah, I think I basically had the same exact reaction as you did. I definitely didn't expect him to retire, especially like basically a week after he was dropped, or now maybe I guess 2 weeks after he was dropped. It just seemed very sudden. But obviously it could have been due to like the timing of the Challengers stuff, and maybe like his inability to find a team in Challengers if like they're in the middle of whatever is going on for that amateur side of things. Um, but yeah, I mean, good luck to Paul and everything coming his way. Obviously, tough sledding this season. There were moments where it looked like things were going to click for that Minnesota squad, um, and it just didn't. And he was definitely he's been put in a lot of disadvantageous situations, I feel like, over the years now in the CDL. Every other time he's gotten an opportunity in the CDL, it was kind of like a mid-season or late season pickup, and he was basically like thrown into a broken team to try and fix what was going on, or turn things around. And this was really his chance to write his own story, I guess, for lack of better phrasing there, and start the season in the CDL. And he had the pen in his hand, and he controlled what was going to happen, but it just didn't work out. He underperformed pretty consistently. So yeah, I'm surprised that he's retiring, and good luck to him in Warzone. It'll be interesting, kind of like you said, to see if maybe he has some success. And obviously, if he doesn't have success in Warzone, there will be the people who are saying the opposite end of that argument, like, oh, PaulEhx is getting shit on by Warzone pros. Obviously, Warzone pros are better than CDL pros, blah blah. So, yeah, I guess we'll see how that goes. I guess on another note too, I saw 100 Thieves signed a Warzone team for the Esports World Cup, and Blast is on it. For those who are more new competitive COD fans, Blast was like one of the up and coming S&D kids before the CDL era, kind of like the last generation of S&D kids with Pharaoh, obviously RIP F3, Decimate and Blast. They were kind of like the three, and Bevels. Bevels obviously didn't stick around playing and switch to coaching, but Blast was on LAG in the inaugural CDL season, and I believe that was it. So he didn't, stick around that long in competitive COD, at least at the pro level, and he's been streaming now for a while, I believe. But it's interesting now he's technically on 100 Thieves, and it'll be interesting to see. We got a couple of ex CDL pros now in the Warzone scene, so we'll have to keep our ears on that narrative to see how things work out there.
Yeah, I mean, you're an idiot if you believe that Warzone players are better than CDL players. I mean, retired CDL players are very good at Warzone, so that should tell you a lot. But yeah, that I guess the last thing is the thing about the Season 3 patch, some methods. Was this on the watch party that he was talking about this?
Yes.
So he said that they're playing on the old patch, not the most updated patch, until after Major 3, which is, so the next 2 weeks, they'll be playing on the old patch. And he said this is because of a bug or just because of the bad timing?
I think it's the timing. Let me look real quick. Season 3 dropped on April 2nd, I believe.
Yeah, so right when the qualifiers
and the matches started.
Yeah.
The reason that's notable, at least I think, is the Jackal was nerfed in the CDL or in the Season 3 patch. And I know I've seen Parasite at least tweeting about it, and in terms of like ranked play, because there have been the GAs for the Jackal now where they weren't using, I think, is either a barrel or a muzzle attachment or something. I think it was long barrel because obviously that added damage range, I believe, to the SMG. So it was like making it easier for the sub to kill at longer ranges. So the pros GA'd that, so you couldn't use it, and it make the SMG more SMG like. But now after the nerfs, I think I saw Parasite tweeting like we gotta get rid of that restriction in ranked play at least, so that they can put the attachment back on and make the Jackal be able to hang a little bit better. So it will be interesting to see after this major if those Jackal nerfs have an impact on the meta, which would be crazy if we don't see a lot of weapon meta changes in recent CDL years, but if we have like a new sub as the go-to sub for Major 4 champs and EWC after the Jackal has been like the do-it-all SMG for the first half of the season, that'd be pretty surprising. So that's I thought that was just worth noting, just in case there's anybody like playing ranked play or Black Ops 6 and wondering if the games they're watching right now are with the nerf Jackal or not, and it's not. So we'll have to see once that patch goes into effect after Major 3. We'll have to see if that has an impact. I did see too in ranked play, they were testing a map called Barrage, I believe, in ranked play, and I think there was another map, but I don't remember. And obviously I haven't been playing, so I'm not sure what those tests have been like, but I know Methods and Scump were both like, at first they were like, why are we testing this map? Like, this map sucks. And I think it was Methods the next day on the watch party. He was like, it's not as bad as I thought. It's not great, but it's not as bad. I think that, and then I feel like that's been the narrative with Dealership, at least so far, in terms of Dealership being the new map for S&D in this season of or for the Major 3 qualifiers and Major 3. I feel like a lot of people heading in were just like, yeah, this map doesn't seem great, but it it's gonna at least be a change of, not necessarily a change of pace because it's a really fast map, but it's gonna be a new locale, or just give us a clean slate and replace Skyline and Vault for S&D. And I feel like it's been played a decent amount. Now, whether it's because teams actually like the map or they're just testing it to get reps on it, that's another conversation. But I do think there have been some cool moments on Dealership so far. and maybe that'll like give the CDL the idea to make another map set change before the Major 4 qualifiers. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I think there's definitely a benefit to having the CDL and the general public on the same patch. Obviously, if someone pulls out a gun, for example, that isn't normally used, it doesn't happen usually in the CDL, but just entertain me, I guess. Then people might be more tempted to actually get on Call of Duty and see what is up with this gun, see if it's actually really good in ranked play. So there is like some benefit to it, but I think it's fine if this is just the normal. If they just wanted to say like, hey, this season's patch will go into effect next split or whatever next major qualifiers, I think that makes a lot of sense. Pretty sure that's what League of Legends does, right? They do like a patch behind the rest of it, or like the actual game. So like the LCS might be playing on like point 1 or something, and then but the game is actually on point 2. Isn't that how it goes?
As of last year, they've been doing live patch now.
Okay.
That was like they rebranded the LCS, and that was like one of their big things is we want to play on the same patch as you guys are playing, and they started that last year. But you were right up until last year.
Right until I got fired by Esports. That's when I stopped paying attention to League of Legends consistently. But yeah, like I think there's a reason that these esports would do that, and it's to make sure that you don't have bugs, and something like this where it comes out 3 or 4 days before these matches start. Like patches happen on like Tuesday, and like then these matches start on Friday. That's not enough time for these teams. If you're trying to be a real competitive league, that's not enough time for these teams to get used to the patches and potentially change the meta. That just throws everything off. Then I just think it's probably better to err on the side of caution and say, hey, let's slow down. We'll get to the season 3 patch when we start the Major 4 qualifiers, and then we'll play on that for a while. So we'll see if that has an effect or anything. If there are new maps, I'm cool with the maps. Like I'm cool with new maps always coming in. I'm not the one that has to play on them, so that's probably why I'm cool with it. But well, I don't know if it'll actually happen. They're usually pretty. I guess this year is different. Like this year, they have seemed more ready to swap maps in and out, and they've done that multiple times now. So maybe there is kind of a new philosophy with the CDL in terms of the map pool, but it's a little bit different to bring in a completely new map. Like they brought in Hacienda, which was something that they already had known was a competitively viable map in past Call of Duties. So, I don't know if that's nearly the same thing as bringing in a completely new map like Barrage, like you're talking about. But yeah, I think that about does it. Do you want to run through the matches real quick?
I'll run through the matches. You do the standings after that, and we should be good to go.
All right.
So yeah, Friday, we've talked about a couple of these, so not gonna be too long, but we started Friday with that Miami OpTic match we talked about. Miami wins that 3-1. The map OpTic did win, and that was a control. It was 3-2, but obviously Miami won the 2 hard points, and the Surge where Super dropped 16. We had Vancouver Surge versus Gentlemates in the match of Lunars versus Fellow and Lunars versus Neptune, former Challengers players. Wasn't the most competitive series. Vancouver wins 3-0. Lunars did go on a 10 streak in the second round of the protocol control, and LAG went up 2-0 in that control, but then Vancouver won the next 3 rounds to win, reverse sweep the control and sweep the series 3-0. And then we had Carolina versus Minnesota to round out Friday. Carolina won that 3-2. Minnesota started strong with a near 100-point club in map 1. Carolina followed it up, looking really strong in search 6-1. Then maps 3 and 4 were super bangers. 3-2 control ending was crazy. It looked like Carolina had a shot to close it out, and then they stepped off the point, and they weren't able to get that last second to get the tick for control win. And then we had a 6-point win for Carolina in map 4 to force a game 5 dealership S&D. Went to another round 11 for Minnesota. At this point, all 3 of their matches with Kenny were round 11, game 5 round 11s. And Carolina were up 5-2 in the map 5, but they obviously lose 3 rounds in a row for it to go to round 11, and Carolina closes things out in the round 11 regardless to take the 3-2 win there. Then we go to Saturday, Miami versus Atlanta. Talked about that. Miami won 3-1. Vegas versus OpTic. Talked about that already too. Vegas won that 3-1. Boston versus Gentlemates. Boston won this one 3-1. Only map that Gentlemates won was a 6-5 in the search, where Boston blew a 5-1 lead. So if they don't blow that lead, probably looking at a 3-0 or, even a 4-0 if you do count it, because they won the other maps there. So and then we had LAT versus Cloud9. This was the match we were looking at in terms of the whole Attach thing, if Attach was going to be on the roster still or not, and Attach did play in this match, but LAT smoked them 1-3-0. And then we see C9 again to start things on Sunday versus Minnesota, another Game 5 series for Minnesota. So I believe if we look at the standings, we'll go through that in a second, but that should be 4 Game 5 series, which means they played 20 maps, which is the most maps Minnesota could play, which, if you're looking at things, obviously record-wise, not the best for Minnesota, but they do have the maximum number of reps in these online matches that they could get. This one didn't go to a round 11, but it went to a round 10, Game 5 round 10. And it was a reverse sweep for Cloud9. Minnesota won the first 2 maps of the series, including that Nero 16 bomb in the Rewind S&D map 2. But it really, the protocol control, C9 just stomped that 1-3-0, and that seemed like it flipped the switch for them. They won a 4-point hard point in map 4, where Sib went 45-31, and then they win 6-4 in the search. So not another round 11 for Minnesota, but it is another Game 5 loss for the Kenny Minnesota squad. After that, we go to Vancouver, Carolina. Vancouver won 3-2. It is another reverse sweep following C9's reverse sweep. Obviously, this is the last match we see for Vivid playing for Carolina. I don't necessarily know if that's like the major catalyst for a roster change, but on that note, there was I believe it was Carolina's win over Minnesota, the post-match interview, where Nameless was going to ask a question just like vaguely about the talks of a roster change, and then Puckett just came straight out and was ruthless, was like, why didn't you guys pick up Kenny? And TJ was caught off guard. He was like, oh, we're good over here. So people have been memeing that, like, it sounded like they weren't going to make a change, and obviously they are now. So I just thought about that. That was kind of funny. But yeah, so Vancouver reverse sweep after Cloud9, reverse sweep Minnesota. Vancouver does it against Carolina. And then we have LA Thieves versus Toronto to round out Sunday's games, where we talked about this, Beans versus Scrap, and definitely unexpected here on my end, where Toronto wins this 3-2. Toronto won both hard points, most notably, and didn't seem to be, I think there was at one point, there was one short delay, maybe after the first round of the Game 2 search, but didn't seem to be any major online issues with Toronto that at least that were talked about or that I saw. But definitely interesting that Toronto were able to beat LA Thieves here, and a rather unexpected result to end the week, in my eyes at least.
Yeah, as far as the Puckett thing is concerned, I know some people were like kind of critical of Puckett for doing that, because like it did put TJ in like a weird position. At the same time, like, when else are they ever going to be able to ask this kind of question? And it is not like, this wasn't like some random thing that was talked about. Like, this wasn't just like an unverified rumor, obviously. Like, there was like some reporting that they were definitely trying to get Kenny, and it's not like Vivid would be blind, or like he wouldn't know this was going on. So I think this is probably a good idea to ask him about this. Of course, it looks weird because of the way he asked it and the fact that they now made a roster change and they dropped Vivid. But I'm in favor of just coming out and asking people about these reports and rumors, as long as it's not just some random thing that you just saw someone tweet. Like, there has to be some kind of legitimacy behind it, which could be like a slippery slope, I guess. But I'm cool with that. So yeah, the pick'em so far this season, you probably had your worst pick'em week of the entire year. And I didn't have a great one, but I think there were just some pretty key differences in like with the matches I picked. So I closed the gap this week. You went 3-7, I went 6-4. So you are now 105-57 on the season, and I'm 102-60. The qualifier standings as it is right now. The Miami Heretics and the Vancouver Surge are tied for first place. Technically, Miami is in first by themselves because they're 3-0 and Vancouver is 3-1. There is a three-way tie at 2-1 in third place. LAT, Boston, and Toronto. The Breach, they're back up. 2-2, 6th and 7th place. OpTic and Carolina are tied. And Atlanta, Vegas, and C9 are all tied for 8th place at the moment with 2 matches each for them left. Minnesota is 1-3 in 11th. And LAG is in 12th place. They are 0-3 in the qualifiers, 2-9 in map count, which is not good. So they really need quite a bit of help in this last week. I believe Miami and Vancouver are set in the Major 3 winners bracket, if I'm not mistaken. So those teams, not the seeding will change most certainly, but they are in the winners bracket to start Major 3, regardless 1 through 8. So yeah, that about does it for this week's episode. What?
I looked ahead, and we'll obviously talk about it later, but I know we were just talking about when we were talking about the Vivid and Carolina roster change, how they only have 1 match remaining in the qualifiers here, and their last match is against LA Thieves, who have absolutely stomped Carolina this year. So I guess you can look at it as, Rex can't do any worse than what Carolina has done all season without him against this team. But yeah, we'll save that for later this week.
250-0 incoming for Carolina. But yeah, that about does it for this week. We will be back on Wednesday night to talk about the upcoming CDL matches. Of course, will be the final week of the Major 3 qualifiers. So some very important matches happening this weekend in the CDL. And we'll do our predictions and pick them for everything for next weekend's matches. But yeah, thank you for listening or watching. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music. You can follow, or subscribe to those feeds. Our YouTube channel is at close to, I think, 220 subscribers. So please subscribe there. You can also follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Twitter at JBink with 2Ks, at Preston Byers. The podcast Twitter's at Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/JBink with 2Ks. And again, we will be back on Wednesday night to talk about the matches, and hopefully these teams, well, I guess there's one team, and if there are any other teams making a roster change, please, Carolina, announce your roster change before Wednesday night. Please announce your roster change. Thank you. Bink, take it away.
I can't wait to, hopefully I'm wrong here, but I got a sneaking suspicion we probably will not get confirmation until Thursday, as is Ego Chall tradition, or it might even be until Sunday, because like I said, Carolina only has 1 match left, and it's the last match on Sunday. So they technically have a little bit of wiggle room in when they have to announce. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully we do get that info confirmed by the time we're live again. But regardless, we'll be live again later this week. Hope you can join us. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Appreciate all the support. And yeah, we'll see you back here when we're live again. Remember to send the chow.